King Harold becomes an immortal monster under Imu's control, and Loki inherits the throne, along with Elbaf's forbidden devil fruit, meant to bring about the end of the world. This week's color spread features the Rock's pirates in formal attire. The coolest and strongest crew in known history will be missed, and never truly forgotten. We return to the beginning of Loki's flashback. 14 years ago, Shanks was told by Gabon that their former captain Roger has a son, and Gabon found out from Garp the last time they saw each other. And at least at this point, Ace managed to successfully stay away from the Marines. Shanks was overjoyed to learn that he sort of has a little brother somewhere. Gabon hadn't thought about it like that, but admittedly, Shanks and Buggy were raised like their children. With boyish optimism, Shanks figured that with Roger's blood, Ace could very well become the Pirate King of a new era. Gabon reminded him that the title isn't some sort of birthright, it has to be earned, and most people who shoulder the burden of high expectations tend to fall short of the pinnacle. Shanks wondered about that, but to Gabon, that just makes things more fun. Which is a bit ironic on account of all the inheritance and nepotism from so many of our strongest characters. But by this logic, Shanks must see Colin as his little brother too. Meanwhile, Prince Loki had just made it to the castle, much to the silent dismay of the guards on duty. Elder Ja Rule showed up around the same time. Just outside the audience chamber, the guards heard a bit of commotion from within. Their fellows within were dismayed to see their king cut one of their comrades down in cold blood. The man was only following the king's orders to restrain him with chains. Even King Harold questioned his own brutal action. His body was moving on its own now. He realized that due to Imu's orders, he's forced to crush all opposition. Orders from the Supreme One are absolute, and Harold was told to mobilize a grand army of giants at his master's behest. Harold reasoned that disobedience is simply impossible, but more than his body, even his mind was being controlled. Having been branded, he questioned if the effects would be permanent. If so, then Elbaf would suffer turmoil and strife so long as he continues to draw breath. Dismayed, the king foresaw his 144 years of persistent effort and sacrifices all being in vain. In that case, Harold decided that he needed to die immediately and commanded his guards to end his life. They were beyond confused. Mentally, Harold refused to see his country be enslaved, but physically, he was slaughtering his people, so he urged them not to hesitate. But this was all way too strange for the guards to comprehend, and that's when Loki kicked in the door to rudely greet his old man. Loki and Elder Ja Rule saw the king being impaled from all directions by his many guards, but unfortunately, Imu's providence has granted him immortality. Grimacing, Harold could feel his own regeneration. His pleas were no longer verbal as he grabbed hold of his sword. As a prisoner in his own body, he silently begged them all to run as he assumed a stance. And the guards stood no chance. They were torn to shreds by the strongest giant alive. Harold didn't know how he could possibly die now, and was in desperate need of help. Loki and Elder Ja Rule were overwhelmed by the illogical carnage. While back at Gabon's place, Shanks explained that he and Harold are bound by the shallowest pact of the Holy Land, and therefore compelled to serve the Supreme One. He showed Gabon his Shallow Sea Covenant, and admitted that when in range, they're incapable of defying orders, something that Gabon considered to be quite a strange power. Reminiscing, Shanks added that they were only able to speak plainly when they were away from the Holy Land. And it was at that time that Harold realized that the reason Shanks and Shamrock looked so familiar to him was on account of the former's role as captain of the Red Hair Pirates. The two were sharing some dessert and drinks while Gabon's family watched them. Shanks was sure that Harold would happily join the Knights if it would mean securing Elbaf's membership, but that would require an even deeper covenant. Gabon wondered if that would be an issue. So clearly, the One Piece itself is estranged from Imu's existence and powers entirely. Or at least as far as Gabon knows. Shanks informed him that the covenant of a full-fledged knight provides them with incredible strength and immortality. They can also conjure abyss pentagrams that allow them to traverse vast distances, while the cost is Imu being able to influence them from anywhere, making disobedience impossible. A deeper covenant would be tantamount to enslavement, and with the boundless greed of the world government and celestial dragons, there was no way that they would honor any agreements. Shanks began to express his disapproval, but was cut short. There was an absurd outpour of haki coming from the castle. Loki's hammer clashed with his father's sword as he demanded answers. He wanted to know how his dad was still alive despite the wounds he sustained. He wanted to know why he was trying to slaughter them all, and where the hell all this extra power was coming from. Elder Ja Rule begrudgingly drew his sword and urged the king to regain his sanity. The guards called for reinforcements in the throne room. They believed that King Harold had lost his mind, so they needed to stop him. Uncomprehending the gravity of the situation, the guards entering the fray assumed that Loki must be up to no good. While together, Loki and Ja Rule pinned Harold to the ground and demanded an explanation. Struggling to breathe, Harold told the Elder that what he's done is unforgivable. Now Ja Rule was even more confused. Harold told him that he was quickly losing control over his own mind. So urgently, he insisted that his son heed his words. They would need to tell the people of Elbaf what happened. Tell them about the guards he'd killed. Tell them all the ways in which he sinned for the sake of fulfilling his dream of making Elbaf a member of the world government. They would need to spread the word about how he was tricked and manipulated, that the world government sought to enslave their people and make them a horde of destroyers. Loki didn't understand. He wanted to know how his father was tricked. Harold clarified that the government never intended to honor his terms of obedience in the first place. The guards were stunned by their king's words, while the Elder listened intently, because they are missing a lot of context here. King Harold insisted that Loki be the one to eat their country's secret treasure, and he would need Ja Rule to make sure that happens, because with it, Loki would be the only one capable of stopping him. The king never wanted this for his people, and in his failure, he considers himself to be the worst king in the history of Elbaf. Overwhelmed by emotions, he insisted that Loki kill him and claim the throne. Their entire country would need to know how much of a disgraceful king Harold has been. Loki would need to cut the fool down and ascend the throne as a valiant hero. Harold didn't care about how he'd be remembered. With tears in his eyes, he told his son that Elbaf's future is the only thing that matters. In the face of his father's resolve, Loki was at a loss for words. Harold slammed his head against the pillar. He placed all his faith in Loki, sure that he's the only one who can make things right. But with that, the time for discussion was at an end. Harold broke free and tore through several guards. They were dropping like flies, and Harold was no longer himself. He commanded the guards outside to seal the chamber doors on account of a roaming criminal. A guard pierced the king's neck, rebuking his sudden heel turn. But now a proper knight, Saint Harold accepted the distinction and proclaimed himself to be a vassal of the Supreme One. The wound closed without issue. Then he brutalized the bunch with a heavy fist. The king would leave no survivors. No one would be able to tell the truth of what really happened here. An injured guard urged the others to run while they still could, and Saint Harold crushed him underfoot. The Mad King was fully intent on delivering Elbaf to Lord Imu. Following the king's final command, Elder Ja Rule urged Loki to hurry up. The giant prince wasn't too happy about being forced into eating a national treasure of a devil fruit, especially since it meant that he would never be able to swim again. This was all just way too sudden and strange. But now, Saint Harold planned to eat the overpowered fruit himself, which just made things even more confusing. Ja Rule impaled the immortal king from behind, claiming that if Harold ate it, it would be the end of the world. Again, he told Loki to hurry on ahead, because they couldn't afford to let Harold get his hands on the fruit. And in turn, Harold lodged an ancient sword in the oldest giant's head. He returned the artifact of a weapon to the man who gave it to him oh so long ago. With that done, the Night King shifted his attention and stressed the importance of eating the devil fruit and wielding the mighty hammer Ragnir. Loki was running as fast as he could, while his father gave chase. That's when Shanks and Gabon entered the fray by cutting into the Raging King. Gabon was calm, while Shanks was racked with guilt. And based on Loki's later assessment of him, this is just the beginning of that. The Elder was still conscious and managed to recognize Gabon. As they landed, Harold cried out in pain. So whatever they did actually managed to hurt him. Gabon feared for Ja Rule's condition, but the Elder claimed to have been saved by his helmet. One of the funniest jokes from modern One Piece that comes from dire circumstances. He begged the two humans to stop Harold from catching Loki. Gabon could tell that they were in serious trouble here, while Shanks shouted at the king to open his eyes to what he was doing. Harold stood and greeted Shanks while marveling at his own immortality and newfound divine superiority. Shanks was frustrated by their inability to free his friend from Imu's control, while at the same time, chains fell away and Loki entered the treasure room. A magnificent chest was accompanied by a quaking hammer. The forbidden devil fruit passed down through the ages was now within reach, but any attempts to claim it were suddenly thwarted by Ragnir's surprise attack. So it looks like we have a 2-for-1 deal on our hands here. We know that weapons can be devil fruit users as well, as Shamrock even gave us a recent example of this. Since it has a will of its own, Ragnir is presumably empowered by some sort of Zoan type, and is responsible for determining if someone is worthy of eating the forbidden fruit. Now, with how long-lived giants tend to be, for this fruit to have remained on Elbaf and been passed down through the ages, it must truly be a remarkable and exceptionally rare power. With how highly they covet Nika, it's not hard to imagine some sort of connection there. According to Dr. Vegapunk, devil fruits are effectively the manifestation of mortal dreams. And this just so happens to be the country that reveres and remembers Nika as a deity the most. When Loki was a child, he believed that Rox was Nika, but then Rox died. Now, when he first met Luffy, Loki introduced himself as the sun god who will bring about the end of the world, and he also wields Ragnir. So while Luffy fulfills half of Nika's legacy as a liberator with a smile, Loki brings destruction with a smile. Emphasis on devil fruits is always a ton of fun, so I hope you're just as eager to see what it ends up being as I am. And since we're here, it's time for you to leave your best guesses before it's revealed. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.